Welcome back, everybody, to the Thrivestry podcast, mastering the art of thriving at life, where we talk about creating change in our lives and in the world around us. I am your host, JJ, and this is the other host, Gigi. Say hi, Gigi.
Hi.
And today we're going to talk about a new concept I've been massaging and working and writing articles about, and it involves your identity and principles and kind of actions, or kind of the world around us. And we're just going to spend time on this. We're not going to go over any other internet articles today, so this podcast might be a little bit shorter than some of our other ones, but the concepts are deep. The podcast might be short, but the concepts are going to be mind-blowing. So if you guys are listening to this, you might want to check out the video where you can see some of the graphics that I'm going to be talking about, and help you kind of visualize kind of what we're talking about. So the main concept that I'm trying to get across is the way we want to, if you're listening, we have basically it's a bullseye, and at the center of the bullseye is your identity. And those are the things you believe about yourself. There are stories that you tell yourself. It's usually a combination of your upbringing and kind of your experiences and maybe a little bit of genetics. And, people will say things like, I'm a morning person, or I'm an all or nothing person. And that's just what you believe about yourself. And you might say it's what you know about yourself, but it might just be something that you've just come to believe over time. It may not actually be true, but it's something that it's just deep down as part of your core values. And then outside of that ring, we have principles. And so these are kind of rules or lessons about your life and how the world works that you've selectively chosen to follow. So it could be rules of thumb. It could be things that you learned or were taught. So those are a little bit your identity is somewhat centered in those, but they're kind of outside of your identity. They tend to change a little bit more often. Your identity won't change much. But it will change slowly over time. Everyone, knows someone who used to be like a crazy, fun party person in their 20s, and then they transferred over to being a parent who goes to bed at, 9:30 every night. Like people's identities do change over time. And then there's all other decisions that are kind of outside of our identity and outside of our principles. There's other decisions, and those are the decisions that are maybe we don't have experience with, or that are definitely not who we are, right? So we have to fight to act on those things. And so the key to this chart is that the closer the decision or the action is to who you believe you are and your identity, the easier it is. It's almost unconscious, most people don't think that hard about waking up in the morning and going to work, right? Because you're not a person who's just going to not go to work and not have a job. That's just who you are. Or being a parent. It's like, I'm a parent. Like, this is what I do. I just don't do these things. I don't go out partying every weeknight because I have kids. Those are, so there's almost no decision to be made. But principles are a little bit different. Like they're a little bit more. You don't always follow them, or they're just sort of your default when you don't know what else to do. But when you have to do something that's outside of your normal operating, then that's when we start getting away, and it's harder to create those changes because it's not part of our identity or principle that we've come up with. What do you think, Gigi?
I think that is all great. I think for you guys, if you listen to a lot of these podcasts, we did one on this a couple episodes ago, I think it was. So this is just kind of like where this discussion has led us to, this awesome little graphic, which I love. And then, but I'm wondering, like, how you say, okay, so it says it here on the graphic, right? So the identity is who we believe we are, and principles is the rules that we've decided that we have. So could you give some examples of, like, maybe like the same kind of concept, but like, what is the identity version of it, and like, what is the principle version of it?
Yeah. Let me pull up this other example. This is a car graphic, and it's a car with a bunch of bumper stickers. And I thought of this as basically your identity is like the car you drive, and your principles are like how you treat your car and how you drive, right? And so like the type of car you pick, the color, those are all things that don't change very often, and it's really tied to your identity because you're presenting that to the world, and it's something that usually you liked the price or the features and benefits of the car, or what it represented from a status position. And it might even include some of the stickers you put in your car. So I've got a car here and I put these bumper stickers like wag more, bark less, which is I always thought was a cool sticker. But then I put like Jesus is coming, everyone look busy. And of course the customized bumper plate, CrossFit 21159. Or the license plate. But and then the little family of 4 on here. Some people don't do stickers, but I always find stickers interesting because people decided that was going to be their what they wanted the world to know about them, and strangers, this is who I am, and you don't change your stickers very often. And then principles, again, how fast do you go over the speed limit? How often do you clean your car? That sort of thing. How close do you drive to get to empty? There's always the people who are like, they go all the way past the E and then they go fill up. And then there's other people who stress out when they get below a quarter of a tank. Like everybody has their own principles around that.
Gas tank roulette. Like one of my favorite games, gas tank roulette. You're going to make it? You're not going to make it? I don't know.
So far in my life, I have never run out of gas.
Oh, you haven't lived.
Well, and it's funny because I've definitely played gas station or roulette, like there's been a couple of times that I just hate that nervous feeling, like when you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're not sure where the next gas station's coming from, and you're like, oh my God, am I going to make it? So
that's just being ill prepared. I mean, that's not real. Gas station roulette is driving by like 5 gas stations and being like, nah, I don't need gas yet. The lights been on.
Well, yeah. Well, that's in California, we'll drive from the Bay Area by San Francisco down to Los Angeles, which is like a 6-hour gap. And there's gas stations all along the way, but they're usually spread out by like 5 or 10 miles. And I remember when I was working as an engineer, and I had to drive down there, and I'd be driving a truck that wasn't mine, and then being like, oh, I think I can keep going. I think I can keep going. I don't need to stop yet. And then you just start puckering up, like I'm like, all right, I'm gonna turn the AC off and the radio off to save electricity, so I don't use as much gas, so I can make it. And I start driving slower because, your car gets better gas mileage usually below 60 or 70 miles per hour. It's usually like 50 or 55, 60. So I try to drive a little slower. But normally with these principles, it's, again, you don't think about like, oh, today I'm going to drive aggressively, or I'm going to go really fast. Like you just drive the way you drive. You've pre-made those decisions. And you can go fast if you're running late, or you can, decide not to use your blinker when you're someone who always does. But generally speaking, they're like I said, they're just rules that we've accepted that, again, we don't question. We don't have to actively think about, which is one of the keys to principles. And then that's one of the reasons why I'm such a fan of principles, is because because we all have them, but being more deliberate about them and trying to decide, what principles to follow is important, because sometimes principles, so we can get into trouble with these in 2 ways. Let's go through each one. So with the identity, actually, I have that other graphic I'm going to pull up.
Yeah, graphic number 3 coming our way.
It's like a record on this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have identity-based decisions, you have principles-based decisions, and you have everything else decisions. Again, on the outer edge of that bullseye. And so with your identity, the positives are like, again, it doesn't take any willpower. They're fairly fixed. They don't change a whole lot, so it's pretty easy to figure out. What they are and what to work within. But the negatives are, you can get stuck, right? And sometimes people are struggling to lose weight, or struggling to start a fitness program, or do something in their business or family related. And it can be if it's tied to your identity, it's much harder to change that. And so,
I have an example for that. It's like the friends that are like, I want to lose weight, but I hate exercise.
Yeah, but I don't like exercise.
Right. Or I have a sweet tooth. Those are like pieces of their identity that is like a part of them, and it's like, it's so hard for me. And they build these like roadblocks, right?
Yeah, so they don't even entertain the idea of doing it, right? And so they're like, or I have bad genetics is another one. Like I have, all my family's overweight, so I'm just screwed. And that's where the negative of identities is. If you're if you have that belief and you start trying to make changes, you're going against the current, you're going against the headwind, right? And it's so much harder to force yourself to do those activities. And sometimes you can break through. Sometimes, after so many weeks, you can start to become a habit and a routine. But what I found, and I use this in one of my articles as an example, it's like sailing. And so, sailboats can't sail into the wind, right? The wind is what's pushing the boat. So if your destination is directly down or upwind, so you can't go straight at your destination, what sailboats do is they tack. So they go diagonally to the side, and the wind pushes their sail, but they can go off to one side. Now, they're not going toward their destination at that moment, but they're still getting closer. And then they can tack the other way, and they zigzag to get to the destination. That's how tacking and sailing works. And so what we can do when we know that we're having problems and it's an identity-based decision or action that we're struggling with, we can try to nudge ourselves by saying, maybe, I struggle with eating bad foods. Instead of just saying like, I'm never going to eat bad foods again, a tack or a nudge might be, I'm just not going to buy it. Or I'm going to put it in a tub in the garage and stack another tub on top of it. So it's there if I really want it, but I have to go into the garage, unpack some tubs, and then get to it. So you can basically kind of take the temptation out, right? So you can remove it. Another one is, I hate the gym. I'm just the kind of person who doesn't like gyms. And it's like, well, maybe you haven't found the right gym yet. If you can go to a gym where you like the people, you have friends there, you like, the people there, even if you don't like working out, but you like being around those people, then that can become part of your identity. And now your identity is tied to the gym. And this is for the people listening that are coaches and business owners, gym owners. This is where we actually get into why community is important. And you'll hear some business gurus talk about like, you can't sell community. It's not part of your business package. Like nobody cares about community. And I do feel like that's true. You shouldn't be marketing that like, oh, we have a great community. Like it can be in some of your materials, but that's really just demonstrated in the pictures and the stuff you post. Like you don't need to like try to mention it all the time because most people don't know what that means. But where it actually applies is if you have a strong community, people like me do this. People like us do this. And so if they can make being part of that gym community part of their identity, then it eliminates a lot of other bad choices. Like people like me come to the gym 3 times per week, or try to come 3 or 4 times per week. People like me try to eat a little bit better. People like me encourage others and contribute, If that's part of your gym community and they accept that as part of their identity, I'm a CrossFitter or whatever, and this is my tribe, then they get all the benefits that are associated with that. So you can, when it's an identity-based decision and you're really struggling, you look for the easier path or like a slight change, or you can try to change your identity or take on a new one.
You want to know a cool story about an astronaut?
Always.
Great opening, eh?
Yeah.
I didn't even plan that. Just came right out. So Chris Hadfield is a Canadian astronaut, and he was one of the first guys that started to really participate in social media from space. So he was one of the first guys like playing the guitar on YouTube.
I know who he is.
And like had the Twitter account live from space. So
like cool. Squeezing the rag, showing the water.
Oh, yeah, so awesome. What a guy. So he came back and he's written a number of books now, but the first book that he wrote was just kind of like a little autobiography. And the biggest thing that I got from it was this sense of identity that he had. He took on this identity of an astronaut when he was 9 years old. And every time he made a life decision from that point forward, he thought to himself, what would an astronaut do? And he made every single decision, all of his career decisions and a lot of his life decisions based around this goal of going to space. And obviously, he's been there, he did a great job, and now he's like he's a Canadian hero, right? But but it was all because of this really strong identity that he invoked and used it to guide all of his decisions. What would an astronaut do? So cool, right?
Yeah, I've posted an article. I shared it through Thrivestry before, but it was about the crew team from England, and they weren't really that great as far as in the world stage. And so they came up with this sort of team mantra was, will it make the boat go faster? And it was like everything in their life was like, okay, I'm going to eat. Well, is eating this going to help me make the boat go faster? So they would eat healthier, and like training and like recovery and every, all these things, like, is this going to make the boat go faster? And so their identity was tied to that. And so then they did amazing. Right. So yeah, you can definitely do that. The other thing that we see with the identity stuff sometimes is you can get a paradigm shift. And sometimes someone can, and this is kind of like the diamonds that I'm always looking for when I'm reading all these articles online and doing all this stuff, is I'm always trying to find this one concept or a phrase or something like that that can change someone's whole paradigm. Their whole perspective can change. And like one of them that I like is, you got to put your own oxygen mask on first. Like you can't take care of your kids or help anybody if you're failing, right? If you're struggling. So, as somebody who I love to help people and I'm always giving, I tend to like put my own desires and my own needs last. so like trying to remember.
Oh, you're so altruistic. Oh, JJ, what a great guy. Yeah. So helpful all the time.
In the job interview, well, what faults do you have? Oh, I'm just altruistic to a fault. But I have a hard time saying no, right? Like I just like will take on all kinds of projects, and I'm always optimistic about what I can do, and I realize that I have to remind myself of this, sort of like take care of yourself first, take care of your own stuff, so that then you can help more people. So yeah, the identity stuff, like I said, is important that you kind of know what your identity things are and kind of what the limitations are, and then figure out where you want to go. And if you can work within them, great. Or do you need to do a full shift? If you need to do something completely against it and there's no way around it, then just realize that you're in it for an uphill battle, and you might need to eliminate a lot of the other things in your life that are stressing you out or causing you to expend willpower energy, so that you have more space to attack that problem. Principles-based decisions are again, these rules or guidelines that we've decided to follow. And the positives are, having just general rules, it just makes life simple, right? It's just easier to kind of like, you have the ways you do things, and you don't have to like think about a new way or whatever. Principles, again, kind of like even just exercising in general. If you may not like it, it may not be part of your identity, but like, I just need to work out 3 times per week, whether it's at the gym or do something physical outside of the gym. And as long as you follow that principle, you're going to get the benefits of it. I think. All
right. And on that note, I have to go. I'm so sorry. I would love to help you more. I'm not like you, and I have no problem saying no.
Well, guys, it's just going to be me from now on. Thanks for your help, Gigi. Say bye, Gigi.
Bye.
And so having these rules it just makes life more simple. Like one of my articles, I talk about having, if you want to have a long life, there's 6 simple things you can do that are guaranteed to extend your life. If you get good sleep, you floss, wear a seatbelt, be nice, and then eat like an adult, and don't smoke. Those are the 6 things that guaranteed you are gonna not have or you're gonna live a long life. And so you don't have to make a decision every single time, like, oh, I don't want to smoke today, or I'm just going to sleep when I feel like it. If you live by those principles and that's one of your goals, then it makes things simple. Because one of the things that this applies to, identity wise and principles wise, is that we want to avoid decision fatigue. And so we're assaulted every day by marketing, whether it's on the TV or the internet, or driving home, driving past all these billboards, and we're constantly having to decide whether we want to buy that thing or eat that thing. And so if we have these principles, like, if you decide, I'm not the kind of person who goes through the drive-through on the way home from work, my principle is I'm going to go home and have a home cooked meal, then you don't get affected as much by all those decisions, instead of trying to decide where you're going to eat on the way home. The other thing positive of principles is that it makes it easier to learn new principles. It's easier to learn new principles than it is to change your identity. And that's because, like I said, identity is fairly fixed. It's pretty concrete. It's hard to go against, but principles, you can decide to have a slightly different principle, or add a new one or modify an old one, because your situation has changed or whatever. And so I think that's really important because some principles, like I said, they're outside of your identity. So you kind of have to have some sort of plan before they come up. So you're not always having to think about it all the time. Some of the negatives to principles are they can be incorrect to start. So you might have been taught something or you believe something and you've been following, like a lot of people for the longest time thought fat is bad, right? You shouldn't eat fat. It's bad for you. And so that's a incorrect principle that people are still living by to this day, even though we know that that's not true. Or they could become outdated. So maybe that principle applied really great while you were younger, or when you were at a different job or a different place in your life, but now it doesn't apply anymore. So you need to be aware of those, and they need to be updated. Sometimes they're too simple, so they don't cover enough scenarios positively. So you might have a simple principle that you live by that you overuse, right? And you're not flexible within that. So sometimes it might be more nuanced, and so principles can get you in trouble that way. And then also trying to live by too many principles, like trying to be really strict to your principles and having a scenario for having a plan for every scenario, can be really stifling, right? So it prevents you from maybe trying new things or exposing yourself to different things. So or it can make you frustrating to work with or be around because you're really strict on your principles and you always do this, you don't do the other things. So that's where a negative of the principles decisions go. Now the everything else decisions. So this is, again, everything outside of those first two core things is kind of stuff that you've never been in, situations you've never been in, decisions you've never had to make, or things that are definitely outside of your principles. Maybe you've run into these situations before, but you have to do something that you wouldn't normally do, or definitely don't have that your principles don't allow you to compensate for. So now you have to actively force yourself to do it, or you have to make decisions about that. And the positives are, these are usually, if it's a new experience, they're kind of what make life interesting, and deliberately doing things outside of your core principles and identity are kind of what make people interesting. It builds character. If you're somebody who doesn't like going to the gym, and then you sign up for this great gym that's going outside of your identity and your principles, and it can make life more interesting, right? And so the other thing is it's not being completely tied to principles allows more flexibility and freedom. So you don't want to have your principles, so again, trying to cover everything so that you aren't flexible. You can't just be different, and you're always the same person in every scenario. It's good to kind of play around and try playing a different role. But the negatives are, again, I mentioned that decision fatigue, right? If we're always trying to think about our every action that we do, we have to decide like exactly what outfit we're going to wear, and which toothpaste to use in the morning, and every little thing that you do becomes a decision, and you can't just go through parts of your day without having to think. It wears you down, and it makes it hard when there is an important decision to choose the right path, or when you have to motivate yourself to do some action, you don't have the bandwidth or the juice to be able to follow through. Another problem is it's too easy to do what everyone else is doing, and I think this is just kind of part of being human. But we tend to just do what if we don't know if it's a new situation, we just sort of follow along with the pack, and instead of thinking actively like, well, what's best for me, and I know everyone else is doing that, but maybe I need to do this because of my scenario. And I think we talked about this in a couple podcasts back about how the people around you influence you, kind of like brainwashing or whatever. But it was, one example they used was, it was at a cafeteria line when they, listed the food's benefits or ingredients or whatever, they saw a certain spread of people's selections. But when they put like, this is everyone's favorite dish, and 99 out of 100 people like this dish, the amount of people that took that item skyrocketed because they took the social cue that if everyone else likes it, then it must be good. And so again, if we don't have if it's outside of our principles and our identity, we tend to just go with what everybody else is doing and not really taking that active role in deciding what we should be doing. And then finally, leaving your decisions up to the moment usually means you'll default to the immediate gratification, right? And so, if you have to make a quick decision, or you're having to do it and you don't really want to sit down and think about it, you'll just pick to whatever is going to give you the most benefit instead of thinking about what's going to be the best benefit long term. You'll think about something that's going to give you a benefit right now, or something that's the easiest right now, instead of, okay, well, if I do this, it's going to pay off in the long run. So that's it. We're going to wrap it up here, guys. That you can see that you want to think about you want to decide what is your identity and what sort of identities have you taken on, and what kind of car are you driving, so to speak. And if you're struggling in one area or another, then try to decide, is it an identity problem, and how you can get around that. If it's a principles problem, you can change your principles or find new principles around those scenarios. If it's an everything else decision, then you can decide, okay, well, what other principles can I implement to make it less of a daily fight or decision process to prevent decision fatigue. And so when you think about like I said, you think about your identity and where those problems lie, and then you think about your principles and is that where the problems are, and then you think about everything else. So I hope that helps, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. It's just really awkward not having Gigi here for the end of the podcast. So. But I still hope you guys got a lot out of it. Check out the YouTube video if you guys are listening in. And some of these articles will go public eventually, I assume. But right now, they're for subscribers only. So if you guys aren't using Thrivestry programming, then you may not get to see them. So think about getting more. The Thrivestry programming is more than just programming. It's a lot of this other education stuff. That's it, guys. Thanks a lot. And I will see you in the next podcast. Bye. That's my best impression of Gigi.